It's a choice. I'm asking, the call to action is you can make a choice. And I'm asking you if you want to be here, I'm asking you to show up a certain way. If you're not comfortable with it, I'm okay with that. Like a lot of people are not comfortable with this. I hate authentic, but the idea of being their true selves, because again, we know we're putting ourselves in a position of being judged by someone else. And some people don't want to be judged by it.
Welcome, everyone. I am so excited to be here today with John Lepp. John, welcome to What the Fundraising.
Thank you, Mallory. Very happy to be here too. Absolutely.
Let's start with you just telling everyone a little bit about you and your company, Agents of Good. And then we can dive into a really fun conversation around creativity and expression and how fundraisers can be thinking about embracing more of those concepts in their day-to-day work.
Cool. Well, I won't bore everyone with my extensive resume. I've been direct response and direct mail nerd for like 25 years and have worked with charities all around the world, storytelling, creativity, strategy, building individual giving programs. I'm an author of Creative Deviations, which has been a really interesting ride. And yeah, these days I'm just hanging out, trying to do the good work, fight the evil in this world, tell better stories, be more creative, and talking to amazing people like you, Mallory. So thank you for having me.
Thank you. I'm really excited for this conversation. Spent some time before we jumped on looking through some of the work that you have done on your website with different organizations and was really inspired actually by the creativity of different campaigns and the ways you were helping organizations tell meaningful stories in ways that were unique and cut through, to use the expression that's so often out there, sort of cut through the noise. But I think there's this other piece that we started talking about before we hit record that I'm really curious to explore, which is actually like the fundraiser experience side of being able to create those meaningful appeals or campaigns. And so I know this is something you've started to think about more deeply. So maybe you want to sort of kick us off with some of your initial thinking.
Yeah. So we were talking about before you hit record, I mean, a lot of people come up to me and they'll see me speak or they've looked at our work and stuff. And I'm always trying to push people to do it themselves. I'm a teacher and I want to show people, I want to reconnect them with their own creativity. People go, well, I can never be creative like you. The stuff you come up with, I could never do. And and I remind people, we were all born creative. But it got knocked out of us in the system because the system, whether you're anywhere in North America or almost anywhere in the world, doesn't like people who work outside the box, outside the edges. We're built to fall in line and we even train in school to be good employees. Do you know what I mean? And so I'm trying to push people to move outside that status quo of how we're supposed to be or how we're supposed to do things. Because especially in fundraising, like you said, in this sort of attention economy, when you exist in between the lines, you're not standing out. You're not going to get noticed. In the US, you have 1.5 million charities and 90% of them don't want to stand out. They don't want to stand out. That's a problem. How are we supposed to actually move forward as a sector if everyone's just trying to do the same thing and not, God forbid, stand out?
Okay, so it's interesting because in a lot of my work, I talk about what's happening inside the brains and bodies of fundraisers that creates resistance to taking different fundraising actions. And I think a lot about the stress that fundraisers experience in the sector and how that leads to, not just burnout, but this survival mode where we sort of lose our ability to access these other parts of ourselves because we're in protection, right? And so when I think about people not wanting to be visible or seen or unique or risk somebody not liking them, it's like this protection mode of sort of being unable to brace for critical feedback or somebody not liking them. I'm curious. So I think about that a lot in terms of how do we support fundraisers to in their brains and bodies to be able to have the ability to be open and connected and more embodied and emboldened. I'm curious from the sort of creativity side of things, how do we support fundraisers to really embrace that part of them and then sort of use their experiences being more creative to help fuel their sort of interest and momentum in sustaining it?
Wow. Yes. There's a lot in there. When I talk about creativity, I'm talking about being naturally curious. Do you know what I mean? That's what as creatives, whether you're some people, we all have creative expressions. We all have passions. I'm always trying to dig into people's personal passion because that's, even if it's bread making, that's where I'll give me that all the time. And we all have personal passions. And when you have passion and you're curious about something, you're trying new things, you're like trying to find different ways to approach things. I'm asking people in this work if they've chosen fundraising as their craft, that they want to be here as a career. And I learn a lot of people stumble into when they get here. I want people to be curious in their work. And it is terrifying. I mean, it's built into our DNA from early human days. Like, we're always like, is that a snake or a stick? Do you want me to run away now, or is it okay to pick up? Like, it's in us, and we're always trying to stay away from things that could harm us. And being creatively curious and asking questions puts us in a dangerous position, you know. So even the things you're talking about, Mallory, it comes back to a root fear that we have as humans. Even the idea of moving outside the status quo. If we did that back in the day, we would get stoned or outcast to the forest. Do you know what I mean? You had to be conditioned to stay as part of the community. We moved together. We did things together. We showed each other how you had to be a part of the community. So the things we're talking about feel unnatural and really, you know, I'm my whole life. I'm used to getting judged. I'm used to people going, I don't like that, or saying you're not very good because of the way I did something. And I don't. It's not a good feeling. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's not. So I'm asking people to confront their fear, but so my book, the whole idea of creative deviations, was there. I'm asking people to take little steps outside the norm. Just go off the trail, just a titch. That's all I'm asking for, because when you do that, especially in direct response and direct mail and fundraising, you will see the results of just taking. The donors will want you to take that little extra step. Doing something like I talk about, using paper clips and the importance of using paper clips in appeals, or putting stamps on weird angles, or smearing ink on purpose. I'm not looking for people just to appear human in this work, but you can go further if you wish. But, you know, there's so many, even EDs and members of boards, so many instances people just are afraid to be emotive. God forbid we can appear vulnerable. I don't need to tell you, Mallory, as a woman, that God forbid in an organization you appear vulnerable and cry about something at a certain time. Someone say, stop being unprofessional. Fuck, I'm so over that idea of professionalism. It's ruining our work because we're human. I need you, you need me, we need each other. We have to build a better world together. So only by expressing ourselves and putting that passion into this work, that we need each other and we have to help each other, will we heal ourselves in little ways, but hopefully big ways too. That's all creativity to me. That's just being human, being inquisitive, being helpful.
Okay, I talk about curiosity a lot in my work, but I haven't actually connected it to creativity in this way. And I really appreciate this framing, right? Because I think about curiosity and the relationship between curiosity and judgment, right? Like, how do we decrease judgment by increasing curiosity? But I love this idea of creativity also being sort of an antidote to judgment, probably both like in ourselves and our own experience, and also in terms of how we create space for other people to engage with our work.
Yeah. Again, my brain, like yours, is kind of like racing through in terms of like, I just think about, you know, like we have space in our own personal lives to express ourselves. Like, I like cooking is my jam and stuff. It's a very creative exercise. Some people like gardening. And it just really is about what happens if I do this, or what if. It just comes back to that what or why, kind of usually the two main questions and stuff. And I think if we do that again in our organizations, and we just start to challenge some of the, like, it's always been done this way, kind of that sort of status quo thinking, and just kind of go, look, why though? Why are you like that? And I have to move with the fundraisers I'm talking to at any given time, or the fundraiser I'm talking to. Some people are only comfortable making these little shifts because, like you said, it comes back to a protectionism. Like, you know, I don't want to get fired because, God forbid, I did something different. And some people are like, hell yeah, I'm ready to just like, let's tear it apart. That's how I work with smaller and medium sized organizations, because I work with EDs and leaders who are like, hell yeah, let's just tear it apart. This isn't working. Let's figure this out. The big one, let's not get too wild here. We're like a 1% increase and we get to keep I'm making light of it, but you know what I mean? Like, do you see more what's the word? Ingenuity? Is that the word? Or creativity amongst smaller, medium-sized organizations, and they really can outbat the big organizations very quickly because they're able to reroute themselves into their own personalities and humanness and express themselves as a collection of humans. And again, that to me, that's all creativity. It's all design, how it all works together. And people need to think about that. They're not just, they're not just doing one thing. They're part of an ecosystem, and they have to think of the whole ecosystem as they move through it. So I think of like the direct mail packs, same thing. It's how it all works together all the time. That's design to activity.
Okay, there's something coming up for me as you're talking that I think is really interesting. I'm curious what you think. So I've been thinking a lot about the way we talk about donor engagement as these really kind of like one-off response metrics, right? And it's really like, how did the donor behave kind of in their moment that this prompt was put in front of them or the email arrived in their inbox, right? I've been thinking a lot about like donor engagement not being enough. And what we need to figure out is sort of how to think about and measure and watch connection, like what connection really feels like and is and means. And what you're talking about is like really hitting that point for me, that like what this sort of curiosity and creativity is about, and this lack of like, I don't know. I think a lot of times we think about engagement as this sort of like stream of activities, this like one directional set of checkboxes to like measure a relationship, but it still feels very transactional. And what you're talking about here is real like connection. Like, how do I let myself be more known? How do I create space for the other person to be more known? What does it look like for us to really like be human together in that moment? And at the end of the day, like, I just have to believe that anything that's going to feel ultimately better to the fundraiser and to the organization, at first it might lead to more discomfort for the reason that we've already talked about, but that ultimately feels better and more aligned is going to feel better to the donor on the other side of it.
Oh, I'm absolutely. It's a choice. I'm asking, the call to action is you can make a choice. And I'm asking if you want to be here, I'm asking you to show up a certain way. If you're not comfortable with it, I'm okay with that. Like a lot of people are not comfortable with this. I hate authentic, but the idea of being their true selves, because again, we know we're putting ourselves in a position of being judged by someone else. And some people don't want to be judged by it. And I'm like, that's your jam. You want to come and check boxes. There's lots of jobs out there that's perfectly suited for you. But if you're choosing to be in this craft and do this work, you need to show up for the people around you, including your donors, like you do for people in your real life. I mean, like, I'm not thinking about like, oh, great. If I bring, I'm going to get some flowers to my partner. Check. I'll give her a kiss on the cheek. Check. Make sure I say I love her. Check. Good. And today's done. I can go home now. Like, I can't imagine moving through a day differently in my work than I do in my real life. I'm being thoughtful about the people around me, knowing that only certain people really care, and most of the people who support you in different ways only care a little bit, barely at all, and that's totally fine because that's just normal. It's human nature. But I have a responsibility to create space for donors to talk to me. They have their own stories they want to share. They have their own values that they want to express, and they can do that through their giving. They can do that through their words. So my job is to create space for conversation. Where that is, we're having ongoing conversations with other humans that we call donors. I call them humans. And what is that conversation? What do they want out of the conversation? What are they hoping to achieve for themselves? And how do they want to help me win, me, the organization today? And how can I let them do that? That's my problem with branding, is branding sort of like, here's a professional entity and you are over there. And all you need to do is just throw us some money and that's it. But we're this very professional, big entity. We're doing just fine, folks. But sure, we'll take your money. It's just such a detached from human connection. So I'm coming back to, how do people want to be in this work? How do they want to show up in this craft? And the more people go, yeah, I want something that's more meaningful to me, because when we're connecting as humans, we're sharing our stories, we're creating a deeper connection, and we're fighting more for one another now. Do you know what I mean? We care about her. And Mallory, you and I've only met a couple of times. 5 years from now, you may be my very bestest friend, and I'm here for that ride if that's where we go, because we've connected like this, and I'm here for that all the time for anybody. because it won't be everybody. It will just be certain people. I'm here for it. I'm open to it. I'm open hearted to it. So again, it's just like I've told you before we started recording, I'm still trying to think around my framing of some of these ideas, especially as I talk to present on them. Like, how can I actually make this a presentation so people can walk away going, yeah, I feel different on the other side of this. I want to approach my craft differently than I've been approaching it. And I'll stop that because I start to ramble a lot.
No, I think you're like hitting on this sort of underexplored area of the tension in fundraising between doing enough to address our anxiety that relates to uncertainty while also leaving openness for the realness that human relationships are uncertain. Like, exactly to your point, right? Like, you don't start a relationship with somebody and then say, here's our like Asana matrix of like how we're going to get to be best friends in these, right? Like, it's like we are open to exploring and being curious and seeing, did this feel good? What if we did this together? What if, right? Like, and so fundraisers are always at this tension point, right? Not just for themselves and dealing with their own anxiety around uncertainty, but they're expected to answer to their bosses and their boards and other donors, right? About with a level of predictability that feels in conflict with this, right? This like the actual evolution of real human relationships. And what I think this piece you said before that I can't get out of my mind is this piece around working. Like, is it working? Right? And we are at such a point where the way we have been doing fundraising is not working. Like, it is not working. And like, we are, if we're saying it's working based on a 3%, response rate or whatever, it's really just fear of letting that tiny thing go. But that isn't an example of working. And so I think there's this like underlying question for me around, which I think, is underneath all of this for you, which is like, what are we doing here and what are we here to do? And how we answer those questions should determine then the way in which we approach our work.
I agree with all of that 100%. I mean, it's again, you've like said so many things. My brain is like going. That's oh yeah, that's really good. What was the one thing I was thinking of? Oh shoot, it might be gone. I was thinking about that idea of like the way like the way we've always been doing things. Again, I think we see a lot of these structures falling around us. I think we're in the middle of it, which is why maybe it isn't as apparent. But I've said to people, I think we're actually in a bit of a renaissance period in the way we do work, the way we exist together. I think our sector is also in a bit of a massive shift as some of this like old traditional guard, who unfortunately there's still quite a number of them still are around, are leaving finally for one way or the other. Really, really important. I think there's more people like you and me who are challenging some of these constructs and the structures and the way of doing things. I openly admit people have said, seems like you kind of like make up your work all the time as you go along. And I'm like, I've never had a business plan. I've had goals and objectives that change because I'm in tune with myself as a human, where I'm at and what I want to do. And I think you can do that organizationally. Let's admit that organizationally, these things will shift and turn and move. But we set these like structures, like we have a 5-year plan. And I've seen chairs go, we can't do this because I didn't hear the plan. I'm like, we had freaking COVID. Like, how can you how can you stay there? How can you? And so we saw charities go whoop, and fall off because it couldn't change with what was actually happening in the real world. So we have to adapt. Humans can adapt. It's uncomfortable and it sucks. And status quo doesn't like it because you're just changing something. And change is scary. And existing in the moment, just like that kind of idea of the eternal now. All we have is this moment right now. You and me. There's nothing else in the world going on. We have to stay here and stay locked in each other. And I think if you can do that in your craft and your work, in your lives, and stay connected to the present now, this is all there is. Past is gone, will never happen again. The future doesn't exist. No such thing. So if you stay now, then again, it just changes the way you approach your conversations with your colleagues, the way you sit down and start working on your next pack. What's happening right now? Not only for me, but for the donors themselves. This is creative thinking. This is just the way you stay in tune with all the things happening around you all the time. It makes you ask a lot of questions like, why would we do that? It doesn't make any sense. No, it does never made sense and doesn't make sense now. So again, I think it's a very big, like, that's the thing is we're going off, you and I are going off in all these different places because it's a way of being, and that's independent. The way I want to be and the way you want to be is different, but I'm just trying to bring people back to that idea of just be plugged in, be thoughtful, be here, be now to the work, your donors and what's happening.
Yeah. And I think like something that you're saying is like, we were talking about the fear around judgment, right? Of putting yourself out there. But I think one of the things to know is that, yes, like being a little bit more vulnerable, a little bit more curious, maybe you are opening yourself up to judgment in certain ways, but you're also opening yourself up to connection. And so it's like I had a friend recently who's been sort of expanding their emotional range a little bit say, I'm experiencing like emotional pain that I have never experienced before. And I said, yeah. And you've experienced in the last few months happiness that you've never experienced before. And so I think we expect ourselves to be able to go really deep just on the positive side of things. We're like, ooh, I can, tweak and craft and whatever these things and all the positive, but not have that same range in terms of the tenderness that it creates. And I think there's a level of acceptance of saying like starting to move forward and be more open and try some of these things. Yeah, it might be opening the lid on both sides a little bit, but also those moments of connection, that those experiences of realness, of being human, for me at least, they really like fuel me and they give me a lot more resilience then to handle the judgment on the other side.
And I love that. It's again, you're making a conscious decision to move through life in an open-hearted manner, and like you said, with that comes both ends in a more meaningful way. Do you know what I mean? Like I like to think I'm a relatively open-hearted, and still have to be more open-minded to certain things as much as I'm open-hearted to things, and put myself in situations that aren't comfortable, especially being a slightly introverted, slightly whatever. And when I do it, I find more joy than I expected of it. Yes, occasionally it's like, I remember why I don't usually do this or whatever. But for me, I find more, it's just actually when you're really open hearted and open to opportunities and different kinds of things, more often than not, it's quite rewarding and joyful and meaningful. It lands differently because there's no failure in it. It's all growth. I've learned something by trying something a bit different. I've learned something, and that's why even my own children. With my youngest, she's fearful of failure, and I even said to her and a teacher a number of years ago, the moment you can teach my daughter how to fail properly, the better human she will become. And school doesn't teach that, so I've had to teach her fail properly and seek comfort in failure because it means growth. We're humans, we're meant to grow. So we're meant to fail. We're meant to, not everything can be a success all the time. But she has to be open to both. And to be open to failure or open to pure success. And those things don't even matter anymore. So am I open to joy and expression and community, or am I just going to stay closed, hidden? So it's just a choice.
Yeah. And I love, what you said that we're sort of winding all over the place here, but I actually think we're modeling curiosity and openness. And I'll tell you, if I then had the assignment to go and write a story about you, John, I actually feel like I could do a much better job than if I had had a list of questions asking you about your background and things you had done. Like, I feel like in our 20 minutes together, I know you in a different way than I would have with a really prescribed formula of working through this content. And so I hope people sort of see that in here too, that this is what curiosity results in like a deeper knowing. And it would have been very off brand for us to get on here and be like, here are the steps of creativity when
100%.
so I'm
Absolutely.
really grateful for you being open to that type of exploration and connection with me.
Thank you, Mallory, as I am with you always. No, it's totally good. I love it, and I think that the way you've ended this is actually the perfect way. Is we entered this in a potentially fearful manner. I didn't know what you were going to ask me. You didn't know what I was going to show up, what sort of person I am, And I think that's the whole thing is if you actually just come in this open heart, this is positively intentioned, and let's try some conversation, and we don't know where it's going to go. I think that's a great, like you said, a great model for people to kind of go, how can I do that most of the time, if not all the time in their lives?
Yeah. Okay, before we go completely, though, will you tell folks where they can find you and learn more about your work and work with you?
Sure, if you really want, sure.
I do.
I'm easy to find. Google John Lepp. I'm everywhere. I'm a lot out there. A lot. I'm doing these DM clinics, which is really exciting. So if you do work in direct response and want to learn about direct mail, that's really something I'm working on. And like I said, I'm presenting in Washington in October at the MiniCon Marketing Com conference, and then storytelling in New Mexico in November, which is going to be awesome. And I'm going to try to talk about some of this stuff in a more not rambly way. So we'll see if I succeed with that. Yeah, but that's the way to find me.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time in this conversation.
Me as well. Thank you so much.